Satnam, everyone. I am Reverend Rich, and today is May 22, 2021. It's 26 minutes past 9 p.m. here in Manila, Philippines, and it's 26 minutes past 9 a.m. in Houston, I believe. So today I'm so excited because I have a new friend in University of Metaphysics who's also a climate change reality leader. And let me just give you a brief background of our guest today. Danielle Means is a wife and mom of two boys, currently living in North Carolina. And she has a bachelor's degree in metaphysical science and is currently working on her master's. Environmental justice is a huge passion of hers, and recently she became a climate change reality leader through the Climate Change Reality Project. And it's an amazing organization that helps to educate people about the dangers and solutions of climate change. They also provide education on how environmental racism affects people of color and what can we what can we do to begin to fix these issues. And also, I want to remind everyone, recently something happened in the Philippines and it concerns the LGBTQIA community. And my friend is also part of it, so we're gonna touch on that subject as well. Remember, here in perspective, we encourage you to put things in perspective because that shapes your reality. So, Satnam, my friend Danielle, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm so excited because a lot of times in my broadcasts I try to explain to people how everything is interconnected because I'm also part of the Heart Math Institute. I'm one of their members, and we constantly talk about how when we self-regulate it can affect our environment positively, and if we're not self-regulating consciously it can also affect our environment negatively. So the first time I saw your post about the climate reality project, I was so amazed because you talked about racism and how it actually affects the environment. So can you please tell us what really is the climate change reality all about and how does it actually start in terms of our own vibration affecting the rest of the field environment?
Yeah, I was just on Facebook and everything, and I think it must have popped up because I'm a big environmental justice fan, and you know how things pop up when we're not expecting them. And it was a class on becoming a climate reality leader. So I signed up, and um, it was a week-long class taught by former Vice President Al Gore, and
Mhm.
he, I when I first signed up, I didn't expect it to touch on the social justice stuff as well, and I
Mhm.
didn't even know that they were connected. But they got into it right away and discussed how, a lot of times, minorities are living in these highly polluted cities and places where they've just kind of been pushed off all these years, and it has a detrimental effect on their health. Um, People of color are 3 times more likely to get the COVID virus and suffer from it more seriously due to this. So it was definitely something I had no idea about, and I'm still learning about. And I would, happy to share it with others as well. So it has taught me a lot about the things that we can do, just small things to help decrease the amount of pollution and our carbon footprint in the world.
Yeah, beautiful. So, I hear a lot about carbon footprint, and I'm not exactly sure how it affects the rest of the environment. So, please educate us about it because I feel that in my place, we haven't really delved into it that much.
Yeah, again, I'm still learning a lot. There's a lot to take in. I don't think that week-long class was enough for me to be completely educated. I mean, I don't think we're all ever done educating ourselves, but I did learn that we pump into the world 152 million tons of global warming pollution every day. That's just every
Mm,
day. So you can imagine if we could cut back on, the fossil fuels and the factory usage and stuff, how much effect that could have on helping the environment rather than hurting it. Because at this rate, we're just looking for trouble. It's just gotten so bad in the past 20 years. Um, I did learn that last year in 2020 was our hottest year ever recorded.
mm,
So, and that goes hand in hand with environmental disasters like hurricanes, wildfires, floods,
yeah.
and droughts, all sort of stuff. It's all connected together, and it's just wreaking havoc. And it's only going to get worse if we don't step up and try to make these changes.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing it on because it's true what you mentioned that about wildfires and earthquakes. Because last year, my Reiki community and I we served one of the provinces here because of the earthquake, and every now and then I would post on Facebook for people to come together for heart meditations because it's something that I learned from heart math that if we learn how to self regulate, so no matter how chaotic and confusing situations may be at times, it's also the time where we need to decide to actually pause and be able to just breathe from the heart and relax. Because anytime there is a very heightened sense of pressure for anyone, we need to relax and we need to slow down. So I'm happy that you're doing this. And also, one of the reasons why I invited you to the show is because recently in the Philippines, something very negative happened. And every now and then, I would bring people for issues about LGBTQ, and of course Pride Month is coming. So I was actually busy preparing for it. And at the back of my head, I was just thinking, you know what? I'm just inviting people because we're going to celebrate. What an amazing sense of liberation we had from a very violent, negative past we had over the centuries and as an LGBTQ uh, person, And prior to me planning this, I just watched a movie called Lisa and Marcella, which is a Spanish film, and I was so surprised at what the couple went through because it's a real life story. And then I'm so happy that you're able to make it today because it was only yesterday that I heard of that particular news. So um, please share with us whatever it is that you're comfortable about you being part of the community. And especially, I know, at least for us, we're comfortable already talking about this, but there are other people who are still going through that part where they're asking themselves, do I really need to come out to my family or people that are important to them? So, what was the experience for you, Danielle?
My experience wasn't the worst. My mother was very accepting. She was hesitant at first. She didn't understand, but I only came out to her about 2 years ago, and she didn't understand it, but she was open to hearing about me and my feelings. My father was not, so we aren't speaking, unfortunately. But I do think it's very important, although, a lot of people go through this. It's important to find a safe person that you can open up to, because if you're, by yourself and you don't have that support system, it's extremely hard and very depressing to
Mm,
take that all by yourself and not have a safe place to go to be yourself. And it's not something you should be hiding. It's something that you should be loving about yourself. You should love all of your differences, and that's what makes us unique. And although it can be hard to find people who are accepting, there are people out there that are accepting of it, and you just gotta find that community. And once you get it, it's so much better. They're your new family.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful thing that you brought it up because I know for a lot of people it can be very uncomfortable and you go through that feeling of thinking twice about it before you actually do it. So, I'm not sure how it is in your area, but here there's still a lot of that going on, especially for the new generation. And I know this not just for the new generation, but I also have clients in my coaching and healing practice who are decades older than me, and they are supporting their families, and they're still not out to their families, and it's such a difficult limited experience that they go through. Especially one of the things that has been deeply embedded in their consciousness is that when you're gay and you have relations with the same sex, then you're going to hell, and that God doesn't love you for it, things like that. I'm not sure if you also went through that kind of conversations with anyone that was close to you growing up. Did you?
Yes, yes. My father brought us up very strict Baptist Christians. So that was the biggest issue, and why he won't speak to me because of that. And it's so disheartening, and that's why I really credit a lot of my hope and light now to my getting my metaphysical science
Yeah.
degree. That did an enormous amount of bringing positivity to my life and showing me it's how God isn't within you. It's not just that ominous Christian God thing, and
Hmm.
the guilt and the shame that comes with all that is it's just unnecessary, and it's sad. And it was very hard with my growing up that way, and it makes me so sad that so many people are living that every day still.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And, I'm happy that you brought it up because the guilt and the shame thing, people think that you're holier when you experience guilt and shame. And I'm very sure you have a perspective on it. How, when you actually go to the place of self love and compassion and not criticizing yourself for your attraction, because let's be honest, we can't really just say, what, I'm choosing to be attracted to this person. It's not something like that. It just happens naturally. And the thing that happens naturally for us, a lot of people would say that it's something that God doesn't want you to experience. So please talk about it, and then let me just check YouTube as well. So go.
So for my experience, it it's sad, but I have definitely overcome a lot of that. That shame kind of sticks sometimes. It has become. It took me a while to be open enough, like holding hands, and I felt like people were looking at me or thinking negative things about me because of it. I was very paranoid, and I've never really been a very PDA type of person. So it has been hard to kind of get over that shame feeling of people staring. I do think it can be worse, honestly, for men. I feel like because I think a lot of the more conservative type men have more. They I think they're more anti with the men, and women it's kind of just like okay, whatever. That's just a phase for them. That's what I get a lot.
Yeah.
It's just a phase. I'm like no. It's not. I can promise you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And it's amazing that you're actually bringing this up because although we think these are simple conversations that we're having right now, but I remember when I was a teenager, it was the thing that occupied my head so much. And we're laughing
Yeah.
right now, but when you're a teenager, it's like the thing that occupied your head so much. It took so much of your time, and all of that for nothing, actually. So thank you for bringing that up. And it's amazing that you talked about it because it's true. You talked about how gender differences in perspective can actually uh, be very polar in such a way women can think about it as just a phase, and for men I'm not sure if it's the same thing, but I noticed that for some men, and when they find out that the girl that they want or the girl that is their girlfriend is attracted to another girl, they feel very badly about it, and sometimes it can be a very violent experience. So did you have any experience like that in your circle?
I absolutely do. I was married for 7 years to
Mm-hmm.
my ex-husband, and when we had first started dating, I expressed that I thought that I might be interested in women as well, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to be with a man.
Mm-hmm.
And he shamed me for it, and I immediately like thought like, okay, I just got to put it on my head. It's not. I just got to get rid of it. So I just went along those 7 years, and they were some of the worst years of my life. Obviously, some good years too, because I have my children, but it was very hard, and it put a lot of stuff that I still am working to get rid of. The feeling that you're, like I said, just a phase, and that it's not
Yeah.
real. It sucks.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. I know it must have taken you a lot of courage to actually decide to leave that relationship. And what do you think was the tipping point for you that you've already had enough and that you're already willing to leave that kind of relationship?
I went through a lot of physical and emotional abuse. So the final tipping point was physical abuse in front of my children. And it was just to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, that family image that I've wanted to keep your family together. I came from a divorced family, and I know a lot of people who do come from divorced families never want that for themselves and their family. So they do whatever they can to make it try to work. And it wasn't, and there was no point after that to be forcing and letting my children see that kind of abuse and thinking, especially as a woman, that it's okay, and having boys, it's not okay to be treated that way. And it's not okay, that your parent is doing that to another parent in any form. I don't think any sort of emotional or physical, any verbal abuse is not okay. And if you're in an abusive relationship, then you need to, it's so hard because they can manipulate you, but it's definitely something you should not stay in. I've heard before, like, and I never took it serious. If they can verbally abuse you, they can physically abuse you. And slowly over time, definitely, that's true.
Thank you for saying that, Danielle. It's such an important thing that you brought it up because it starts with something simple and then it actually creates a momentum of something bigger. And this is something that I want a lot of people to understand because we know that verbal abuse is actually a form of violence. And if we tolerate a verbal form of violence, it can actually get into a physical violence. So I'm not sure how things are discussed in the climate change reality project, but one of the things that I learned uh, with many of my acquaintances and also the research that I've done over the years that for example, in the LGBTQ community, if we tolerate anything, any form of discrimination verbally, of course, the energy will catapult to something physical later on. So, please educate us. Is this true? What's your take on this? Is this something that was discussed with your training?
No, they didn't get too much into that aspect. It was very much focused on the environmental, like pollution and such like that. Not so much as in the racism there, but as far I can speak on the fact that if we allow one thing, it's just like a child. Like you allow it to overstep boundaries, then it's just going to keep doing that. And discipline needs to happen when they need to be told they're wrong immediately rather than allow it to continue on. I think we've all seen it in many of our communities. As far like you mentioned, the sad news from yesterday about that person that was murdered. Things like that will happen if we allow this hate speech to continue.
Thank you for talking about it. I'm actually very careful with my words because we know in metaphysics the things that we actually speak about, we bring about. And it's such an important thing to realize that even if we talk about certain things, we still have to talk about it in such a way that it will not create enough energy to make another similar incident, because it's so important to realize these things really do affect everyone, because we know that energy cannot be destroyed, it will just change form. So anyway, I want to congratulate you. You know, it's such an amazing thing that you left that kind of relationship, especially told us that you came from a very conservative type of family, especially when it comes to our parents. It's not easy to actually set boundaries, especially with your dad. So, how is he taking the idea that you're now married and to a person of the same sex, and you're raising two boys? Is did he mellow down a bit?
No, unfortunately not. I had I let him know shortly after Christmas, right before I got married, that I was going to be getting married, and that this was his chance to, commit to being in our lives. I said that I don't have time for part-time people in my life. I want fully committed relationships that, or else it's just not worth, showing my children that. I don't want them to think that it's okay for parents to just, be those, send those birthday cards and Christmas cards. I want, them to see that it takes a lot of work to be a parent and have that support. And just sending those cards once a year is not being a parent. And um, he just never responded to my messages, so I just assumed he didn't want to continue to have a relationship with me. And I did leave the door open. I did say, I whenever you do, if you ever do feel like this relationship can change and you want to pursue a more loving and supportive relationship, me and my kids will be here. So I think it's important to always not completely shut them out, because you never know, something could change and they might they might see something differently.
Thank you for sharing it. And I know it's a very personal thing, so I trust that it's okay I asked you that question, because although, you know, this thing that we're talking about may be a simple matter to other people, but it does touch a lot of family dynamics for the LGBTQ community. Especially one of the things that we were really intending to do for Pride Month was to bring a healthier, more loving, more compassionate, and kinder dialogue amongst families, and that we can talk about certain things that really concern the LGBTQ community, and at the same time, practice compassion family members that have totally no understanding of the LGBTQ community, because I also know for myself that I'm the only person who's openly gay in my family, at least in my mom's family. So I'm really not sure for others, but because I took a lot of psychology classes, I know it's also challenging for members of the family who are just thinking about their own religious upbringing as their only set of moral standards. And at the back of their heads, they're all thinking, I'm telling you to be straight in some way because I want to save you from burning in hell. Uh, some
Yeah.
people think that way, but I'm happy I don't have that. I don't have that experience with my family, but my family members have friends who would every now and then talk to them about things like that. So they're somehow, uh, awkward as well. But I'm just happy that I didn't have to experience that. But I hear that in family gatherings. So, how about relatives in your circle? Do they ask you, you know, of course, to both of us, those are silly questions, but to them,
Right.
they think they're
No one
asking valid questions.
I think I'm the first as well, on both sides. I believe that's openly out. I don't know if there's any members that might, be that way and not be open about it. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the whole religious aspect and them wanting to save us from hell. It's something that you just, I guess, tolerant. They want tolerance. Um, we have to give them tolerance if they, could give us tolerance. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to think like that sometimes because you just want to cut off. I, that's why I'm thankful again for the metaphysical stuff that I've learned because I would have just cut them off before without keeping that door open. If you don't want to respect me or be a part of my life, then you can just leave and never come back. But like you said, it's kind of opened my eyes to like they're just stuck in that mentality and all we can do is just send out love for them too because at the end of the day I don't think they're trying to be malicious. It's just what they believe, and it's as sad as it is. It's uh, there's nothing I can do other than to send that love and light back to them with the prayers that they send to me to change my gayness.
Thank you so much for sharing that because one of my guests in the show is a colleague of ours, Reverend Sheila. Next time, I'll introduce you to her. And she also came from a conservative religious family background. And her friends were saying, I'm going to pray for you because you're probably a lost soul right now, things like that. It's so funny when we talk about these things, but it does happen. And I'm just happy that you're so chill right now about the way you're actually handling it because it's true what you mentioned. It's easy to cut people out with silly questions. Of course, as far as our perspective is concerned, it's silly, but to them, it's really disturbing because of the way they were programmed. And how about your children? Are you able to freely express yourself with them? And how about talks about creator, source, God? I'm sorry I have to ask that because
Yeah.
I also want to know how to explain these things to the younger ones in my family.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, my kids are very, open to that. I explained to them, when me and my wife, got together, like I just said, this is my girlfriend, and they were just like, okay, like it was no big deal. And like I explained, like some people like sometimes boys like boys, and sometimes girls like girls, and sometimes they like both, and I'm one of those people. And they were just like, okay.
Amazing.
And as far as God goes and stuff, I've kept it um, open. I teach them about everything. I think it's I don't try to shield them from anything, and I just want them to know that I've expressed that, God isn't just this person in the sky. He lives in you. And, you teach them some of the things. And I keep the Christian part open as well, because I just, I've just expressed, make sure you don't just pick something and believe it fully. Because when you believe something blindly, that's where the closed mindedness comes, and you're not getting a fulfilling life, because you're closing your mind off to all these other points that you could be experiencing. And you never know, like, growth can come from anywhere. And I think I'm trying to do a good job with that, at least.
I think it's such a beautiful thing that you're able to explain it in such a way where variety is discussed, because so much of the struggle comes from the fact where people are so hardwired that their concept of source or God, creator, whatever, is they're so fixated on it. And when their friends or other members of their circle, maybe at work, maybe in their at school or somewhere, a shared community, they don't share the same views, then it becomes a power struggle for some people. And we know about it because so many of the violent things that happened many centuries ago and even up to now are actually coming from the polarity of ideas, where instead of celebrating diversity and the beauty of learning things from each other, we're no longer experiencing that, unless you have been programmed or you had some idea, because maybe other people are also open to the kind of things that we're learning in metaphysics. It's a big adjustment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So how about your children? How are they able to reconcile things for themselves? Because I'm curious, I'm sure you're also asking them what's their take on those things after you explain uh, those things to them. Where do they mostly lean towards in their idea of source?
um, well, my older one, he's 10, and he's totally on board with me. He's more agnostic, I guess, at this point, which is fine. Like, I just, just keep saying, keep your mind open. You never know what you might start to accept and believe. And then the younger one, he's harder to reach, because he has learning well, it's not so much as learning, it's a neurological issue. He's missing his corpus callosum, which is it's a central nerve that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. So it's almost like autism, and he might actually be autistic. We still have to work on the testing there. So everything with him is very innocent and very pure, and I love talking to him about stuff, because he's the type to be like, if it's raining out, he's saying God's crying. So it's just very innocent.
Amazing. And I love it because, the variety of it will really show the will really show where they're going to come from in terms of how they're going to evolve later on. So anyway, hello to all of you watching. I'm waiting for my friend Danielle to come back on stream. Probably there's something. Okay, she's back. Great.
Sorry,
That's
I don't know
fine.
what happened.
Anyway, I'm amazed that you talked about it because, in one of the airlines here in the Philippines, when they hire employees, certain autistic people are actually part of the corporation. So, because they know that they also have special skills, especially in terms of repetition, I think it's a type of autism, and they actually hire them to do that particular work. And I just feel so happy hearing that, because to me, it's really about finding where a person is most suited to do a particular thing. And I'm sure you know about Helen Keller, and she's such a fantastic uh, personality in history. And you'll never know the gift. of the person unless we really expand our capacity to broaden our horizons and find a way where they will be best suited to perform. So I'm happy. It's such a nice thing to hear that God's playing from a kid.
Yeah.
And you'll never know. There's just so many things to discover from children because I was actually a preschool teacher before I became a professional metaphysician.
Yeah, you can learn a lot from kids. It's, it's funny how at first when he just finished first grade. The first 2 years in school were extremely hard. He did repeat first grade because they didn't have the proper things set up, and they really were pushing medication, and they just thought he had ADHD. And I was adamantly saying that no, it's more than that. I did try the medication like they suggested, and it did not work because you can't cure this. It's not changing. So it made me realize that I need to quit trying to fit him into this box that society, you know, creates. Like that they have to do this and they have to do that, rather than just accepting them for who they are and realizing that they have special gifts that we can learn from. And
Yes.
he's really opened my eyes to that. And now I'm a much better advocate for his well being now in school.
Thank you for sharing that. Earlier, I know I looked awkward because every time somebody would say someone's autistic, I'm also thinking, are they really diagnosing the person correctly? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're also not discovering the gifts of the person properly because last March uh, I had the same case. I had a client whom they said was autistic. And when I was talking to the client and the mom, I was telling the mom, she just has so many amazing gifts and her drive to make things possible is just above and beyond. So she's naturally going to get bored at the pace people do things. And because people cannot understand that level of drive, they're just going to start calling things that to them is available to their vocabulary for lack of further research. So I trust more parents are actually watching this because I know it's a lot of work for you to actually find the variety of information that will best help your children, but it's also not very helpful if parents just go right along with whatever norms the society has already set for them. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, because so many of our schools here are actually traditional schools, and if you have a kid who has special abilities and you put them in traditional schools, it sometimes it's not very it doesn't really work to their advantage, and the teachers, I realized not all teachers are actually driven enough to look for other sources of information. um,
Yeah.
and that becomes a big barrier because if they're just basing what they're telling the parents right now with what they've learned many many years ago, so many things are being discovered that it's no longer relevant. So anyway, for your kid, whom you feel might have a special ability, does he also go to a traditional school?
Yeah. It's been very hard, especially with COVID, because we've been pushing what they have. I forget what it even stands for, an IEP. It's just supposed to be something set in place so um, they have extra help. And for him, he has a lot of trouble with reading and words. I think more it's just that it's not that he can't do it. It's just going to take him longer to learn. He just needs all that extra help. And the IEP would help to where instead of having to write down all of his answers, he'd be able to like record something and say it back instead, things like that. But it still hasn't. We've been at it for a year now, and it's still not in place. So I'm hoping next year will be better. But it's hard. It's very hard because I think a lot of these schools are just stuck in these mindsets of this is the way kids learn, and they try to help as much as they can, but I don't think they know how to really properly help. I mean, even kids who aren't on the spectrum or don't have learning disabilities, we all don't learn the same. And I think it's pretty obvious that the system isn't working and that we should, be changing it. But here we are, just trying to get
Yeah,
through.
yeah, and I think there really has to be a change in perspective and change in
Yeah.
the way we approach learning, because one of the things that's very important to me right now is realizing that the way traditional schools are set up, it's really about a head brain oriented kind of learning, and it doesn't really serve us in our adult lives. you know
No.
Especially, I'm a practitioner of yoga, and one of the things that's taught to us is that you have different brains. You have your gut brain, heart brain, and your head brain, and the most reliable source of information, especially when it comes to making decisions, will come from your heart brain. And I'm not sure if traditional schools are actually updating that aspect of information dissemination uh, to kids, and that's why I think a lot of us are having to deal with mental health awareness.
Mhm.
Um, is it something that is discussed right now in your kids' schools?
I think they're trying. Obviously, I think it could be better. I don't think that it's very successful. I think that he's only pushed through first grade right now because he's already been through it twice now. So I don't think they want him again. But honestly, I don't think he's ready for second grade. But it's like, what are you supposed to do? I don't want to hold him back again. And all I can do is hope that this year he'll get more help. And as far as private schools go, I mean, I don't know if they're any better, and if they are, they're expensive. It's hard. I really don't have an answer for it other than to just trying to. He's in multiple therapies. So he has regular therapy, he has occupational therapy, and physical therapy. Luckily, I think the physical is soon coming to an end because he's mastered some of his goals. Like they did help him learn to ride a bike, which has been great because he's been able to get outside and do something that he's wanted to do but hasn't been able
Yeah.
to. So hopefully, just got to keep advocating for them and not conforming to what they want. I think is the biggest issue for us parents who have kids that have disabilities.
Thank you for sharing that, because I remember a colleague of ours who's also into discovering more about the autism spectrum, and I think he has a school or a learning center. So I'm excited to introduce both of you to each other. And it's funny because when we think that there's a learning disability, automatically we think it's the other person who has the issue instead of us not stretching our capacity to think and to discover what else we can do to understand the gift of the experience. And I think it's a lot easier for both of us to appreciate that because of metaphysics. We know
Yeah.
that we're an evolving soul, and there's just so much to learn from other people, especially children. There's so much to gain from whatever it is that they're telling us, and they're making us discover in their new way of doing things. So anyway, for your 10-year-old kid, how's school like? Because I hear this a lot in the States. The idea of bullying is more rampant compared to what we experience here. How is it uh, doing now? Is it less because there's COVID? Probably people are, their awareness is diverted somehow.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I haven't had too much with him. He struggled for a little while because of the family dynamic when I was married to his father. It was kind of hard, so he had some issues then. But now he's a straight A student basically. his he's kind of more like me, social anxiety, a lot of it. So with him, actually the other day they asked me to paint their nails, and I let them know. I was like, listen guys, like I think it's awesome you want your nails painted. I'm all for it, but I have to tell you that there may be kids in your class that might not be accepting of your nail polish, and they might get made fun of or something. And they were like, "It's okay, we'll handle it." And I said, "Okay." So I painted their nails, and they went to school and came back, and I was like, "How'd it go? Did anyone say anything about your nails?" And they were like, "No."
That's awesome because
Yeah. So I'm
yeah,
happy that
so
the newer generations kind of just it's becoming more normal, hopefully.
awesome. I'm just curious. So you mentioned, if I heard it correctly, that they're going to traditional schools right now. That's amazing because, like what you mentioned, there's a possibility that if you go to a traditional school, people are thinking a certain way and they may not
Mhm.
be as welcoming of you having a nail polish done that way. Because a couple of years ago, I did my research, and one of the things that I had to submit for my requirement as a teacher, because that's what I first studied for, was to come up with a school that was LGBTQ friendly. And the school system that I based it from was actually from New York.
Oh.
And the school system is called Bank Street Summit School. So I'm not sure if you've heard of it in any way, because that's where I got my research from.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it is. So you haven't heard of it?
No, no, it
Awesome. But
sounds
I
great.
think your traditional school is relatively more progressive in thinking.
Yeah,
Because
hopefully.
yeah, it's amazing because when I submitted that type of work, and then I talked in the introduction when I had to submit that paper, where I'm doing this school because I want to foster an environment where it's LGBTQ friendly, and we're keeping up with the changing times, and we know how to use tradition and balance it with whatever new thing that we really have to evolve towards. And of course, I didn't really get a high score with my with that kind of idea in a traditional setup.
Yeah,
So
I can see
anyway,
that.
with you growing up, did you ever have to go through it? Um, I mean, you already had that idea that your preferences might be for both sexes. Was it as early as high school that you have to go through it, or was it only after your marriage that you realized that you were leaning towards being attracted to both genders?
I think looking back, I can see where I would have been, but then I was so programmed that I had no clue, no clue. I just went along like, oh, girls are pretty. I like girls more because they're prettier, but I didn't think anything of it. I just went along because I was programmed that way, and it wasn't until after. I mean, we didn't have a very big group of people that were out then, maybe three or four in my school. But I don't think they were. I'm not sure. I can't really speak for them if they were picked on too much. I don't believe so. But luckily I was. I feel like my high school wasn't too bad as far as bullying and stuff goes. I never felt bullied. I was more of a loner though. It wasn't until afterwards where I started questioning if my sexuality more and slowly opening those doors to being like, okay, it's okay, we can try
Yeah.
this.
The transition is actually not very easy, especially if you come from a heterosexual relationship. Because I've noticed that for a lot of people, when they're just beginning to realize that they're also attracted to the same sex, they go through that battle in their heads, and it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Uh, So how long was it for you? Because I've like witnessed it for decades, happen to
Yeah,
different
I'd
people.
say, oh gee, it was probably right after high school. I would probably say maybe from 19, I battled it all the way up, and kind of I'd open the door a little bit here and there, and I just was afraid. I think that was my biggest thing, and not only afraid of what other people would think of me, I was more afraid for myself, and I think that's what took me the longest to get over, being afraid of just me, and
Awesome.
knowing it's okay. It's just okay. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
different.
Please explain that because it's gonna be. I mean, I'm just curious that it's difficult for you to be okay with yourself having that kind of experience because, of course, naturally for me, it's so much easier to understand because I was out at a young age. And please, I'm just curious what the battle is like. What's the conversation internally
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I mean, I have the thoughts of that like attraction to women, and I would just kind of be like, you just want to be like them. You just want to be like, you're just jealous of it. Maybe you're just jealous and you could be like that pretty or something like that. And then, I just, the thing was, I am attracted to men occasionally. I feel like it's getting lower and lower as the years go on, honestly. But just men, I don't know. I just don't have that emotional connection. I think a lot of us are looking for or just a deep emotional connection, and I never really had that. I did once, my first boyfriend. We were very close and everything, and then after that ended, I think that's when the doors really. That's when I really questioned heavily if I might be at least bisexual, and I was kind of debating it, and that's when I met my started dating my then husband, and that's when he immediately, when I started to open up and express that I thought I was bisexual, he was like, "That's disgusting. You shouldn't think like that. That's gross." Like, and so I kind of just shoved it back down, and that's where those same feelings kind of resurfaced, and I was like, geez, maybe that is, maybe everything I've been taught my whole life is true. Like, and I just kept shoving it back down. And, but they would keep popping up. You can't get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. But thank you for sharing it. And I'm just curious because the L word was actually a big thing here in the Philippines, especially with the first L word. Was it ever something that you also watched when it was in its prime time?
uh, I do recall a time when I was in elementary school, and I remember being on the bus, and I was picked on a lot then because I had to wear secondhand clothes and stuff, and it was more of a richer school where you had to really dress to fit in and look the part, and I did not. And I
Yeah.
remember a group of kids picking on me and saying, "You're a lesbian," and I didn't even really know what that meant then. And I just started. Ran home to my mom. I was like, "Hey, they called me a lesbian," and now it's like, guess they were right.
Yeah. I'm happy that you brought this up because a gay client of mine and I were talking about this. And, it's funny that you had that kind of experience about clothes because even I had to go through it. So people think that those things aren't supposed to be an issue, but it actually is. Something people had to go through an awkward experience. Thank you for sharing that. And our colleague, Dr. Claire Hinsley, says, I love the embracing of one's personal truth, whatever the subject is. It's so inspiring. Hello there,
Yeah,
Dr. Claire. And yeah, maybe I can have a panel discussion with both of you next time, especially Danielle talked about, getting over guilt and shame. And Dr. Claire, when she was my guest here in the show, one of the things that we talked about a lot was being happy as your as that amazing pointer to you being in that sweet spot in your life where you know that you just have it all together.
Yeah.
It's so difficult for us because we're so hardwired to think that you have to be guilty, you have to be ashamed in order for you to think that you're normal.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's actually otherwise, as Dr. Claire was saying, that the most important gauge for you is to realize, are you happy with your choices? And it's also the same thing that Dr. Masters is talking about. So it was a lot of getting over unhappiness programmings in the past. I'm very sure you have some things to share about it, Danielle. And at what point in your life did you start choosing your own happiness as your personal gauge? That this is your sweet spot, this is where you're supposed to be in life, and this is where you want to grow progressively onwards.
Yeah, I feel like it's all connected too. And I'm still learning to try to be my most authentic self. I think we should all be striving for that because we'd all feel so much more free. But for me, it started when I stepped outside the box of the Christianity and that kind of God and looked at it more from, I guess I dabbled with Wicca a little bit, but it didn't really, I like the aspect that, God is nature. That's what I kind of went off of. And that kind of drew me into metaphysics and that kind of stuff. And that's when I found the University of Metaphysics. And that really opened the doors, like I said, and it made me realize that I want to be a healer and I want to um, all this stuff's connected. Like it all goes hand in hand. I just want to help people, and I think the best way I can do that is through metaphysics. And I think it's helped me to put myself first more because you don't put yourself first with your happiness, your kids aren't going to be happy. Like it starts with you.
Exactly. For sharing that. I trust more people are watching this and they're gonna watch the replay if they're not watching it now, because here in the Philippines it's so difficult to get over the programming where other people's opinions come as more important than their family members' own happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And we know as metaphysicians it's such an insane way to live, and your body's going to later on act up if you keep living that way. So another thing that I want you to share, please, is about you finding yourself finally enrolling in University of Metaphysics, and why was it so important for you to get a degree? Because for some people they just end up becoming enthusiasts about the subject. They would just read a book but not really do something about it like you did, and you enrolled.
Yeah, I definitely wanted a career in metaphysics. I still do. I'm working on it. It's just something I'm very passionate about, just like the environment stuff. And I just felt very connected, and I've never felt more connected to God than I have since I gotten my degree and realized, truly what God means for me. And it might not be the same, it might not be the same for other people, but that's what it is for me. I do feel like a lot of people are like me and that they are sick of the shame that comes from, the typical conservative Christian God or whatever religion, because a lot of them are very rulesy, I guess, and not promoting your own self happiness, And that being said, I'm not saying to go out and like just be completely selfish, but like you need to put yourself first and love yourself and really respect yourself, or else you can't respect others. Uh, you can't. How can you go out there and tell other people what they should do when you can't even love yourself?
Thank you for sharing that. It's such a beautiful thing to be part of your awakening experience, and at the same time, hear you where you're coming from a place of being a bright light for a lot of us. I thank you for guesting on the show, and it's been an amazing conversation with you. I trust to have you and your wife next time.
Yes.
And Thank you so much for making time for us and my viewers. And I also would like to ask you, if there's one perspective that you want to leave with us tonight, what would that be? I know you've shared a lot, but if there's one thing you want us to concentrate on, please let us know. And of
Yeah,
course, you want to take action from it.
yeah, I would say to always keep an open mind. I think that's the biggest thing. And even, like even with our metaphysics stuff, keep an open mind, because when you close it off, that's when you start closing doors. And I think that that's the most important thing for me right now is keeping that open mindedness, because you never know what way, what things it could lead to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danielle. It's been a fantastic conversation with you. And, Pride Month is coming. So I'm excited to have
Yeah.
you again on the show. Dr. Claire, I trust you have time for us. So, here in perspective, we learn a lot from different speakers. And one of the things that I specifically like about what Daniel shared with us is that there's really that part where you have to go through that inner conversation, whatever it is that you're actually deciding on changing in your life, but at the same time, making the decision ultimately, because she's made a lot of decisions that changed her life right now. That's why she's so much happier and she's more purposeful, and she's able to make a lot of difference in for herself, and at the same time radiate that to a lot of other people, including me. That's why I guested her on the show, especially about the climate change reality project, because obviously the globe is getting warmer and warmer.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, everyone, I trust that you pick one perspective from Danielle today, especially she mentioned about keeping an open mind. And we know that as we keep putting things in perspective, it's so important because it shapes our reality. Thank you, Danielle, for being our guest today. So I trust that all of you had a fantastic time and you're able to apply what she said, especially about keeping an open mind. If you have other suggestions for the show, especially Pride Month is coming up, please let me know. I want to thank the University of Metaphysics, the International Metaphysical Ministry, and the Global Coherence Initiative for continuously doing an awesome work. Satnam, everyone. It's been a pleasure having all of you with us tonight, and to the rest of the viewers who will catch up later. Satnam, everyone, and have fun. Remember to put things in perspective because your perspective shapes your reality. And so it is.